Hello, this is Steve back again. It's been a while since I did a video, so I thought I'd go ahead and do one. Anyway, this is going to be just a brief history of the U.S. economy as I see it. And as we know today, I mean, it's obvious the middle class has been destroyed. One thing that I noticed was in the late 60s, um, there were good jobs. Your job included a pension. So you were getting Social Security when you retired, plus a pension from your job whenever you left your job, which is usually before you get Social Security, but you get both of them. So also they had medical, dental, all kinds of good insurance. So every insurance you need, you would have that. Also, from about FDR's time until I don't know the late '60s, let's say, there was uh, really good home ownership. I know that uh, I was born in '68, and by the '70s, one thing that I did realize is a lot of people had a family house. So, in other words, there's a lot of couples, young couples and stuff, that would buy a new house, whatever, leave their family, whatever. But there was always, for the vast swath of the middle class, the grandparents or somebody in the family had a house and they owned it free and clear because they paid for it for like whatever. Some people pay 30 years, some people pay 10 years, some people pay 20 years, but the economy was it was normal. Okay, it was I would say, even though the United States was kind of the beneficiary of World War II in that a lot of the United States didn't get destroyed. Instead, it had a lot of manufacturing built up at that time. Um, Still, the idea of the FDR's, you know, different plans for making the country better were actually working. So all through that time, it was working. So anyway, let me get back to what I was talking about. So that was kind of a good time. I won't go into why everything was good and whatnot of the taxing policy and whatever. I want to get more focused on how it got destroyed. So at some point, like around Nixon's time, we had this fake war on drugs. So that was like kind of the beginning of big government coming along and starting to do some weird stuff. Even though they've been doing it all over the world, right, in Latin America and other places, going in and just robbing people blind, stealing everything, and creating a United States empire, basically, which is another reason why we had a decent economy. But still, I think it was more of the fundamentals. So anyway, we had this war on drugs that came along. Then we had stagflation. Now they blame stagflation on Keynes, the Keynesian economic model for the Federal Reserve, and then they had this guy come along called Milton Friedman, who they say is so great, Milton Friedman. So I don't want to get in an argument between Keynes and Milton Friedman. I think both of them had their ups, good and bad side, and they had a kind of a fake economy anyway. So I won't get into that part of the discussion. But then we had stagflation in the '70s, and stagflation just means that there's high inflation and high unemployment, and high inflation, high unemployment is kind of like they thought that those were inverse of each other, but they ended up being happening at the same time. But one of the things about inflation, which they blamed it on Keynesian model, but I don't. I mean, it probably had something to do with it, but they also had this fake gasoline crisis. Okay, I mean, well, the United States was going, as I said, going all over the world, just trying to take over people, and one of the people were the Middle East, and they wanted their oil. So, and this is the funny part. So, my story that I'm going to have is not a story that you're going to hear from everybody. As a matter of fact, if I get anything wrong, let me know, or if I like get dates out of place or I get things out of place. But this is not really what you're going to read in history books or whatever. But this is kind of my experience that I actually saw throughout my life, and I kind of put it together. So I believe that in the late '60s, um, the billionaires decided, oh, you know what? We want more money. Oh, actually, another result of stagflation is that inflation goes up, but wages don't go up. So in other words, they don't pay people, and obviously the unemployment goes up. So people, well, one of the excuses for Milton Friedman side of the fence is that people didn't want to work because they didn't want to. They wanted to get paid more and more and more money as the inflation went up, which makes sense. Actually, if you really want the truth, I believe that what should have happened is everybody's work week should have gotten lower and lower and lower, or work day should have gotten lower and lower, but have the same amount of pay, right? Or even let the pay go up a little bit, right? That way, you'd have to, the companies would have to hire more people. That would reduce unemployment, and at the same time, you have more people working, means more people have money in their pocket, which means more people can pay for more stuff. So the inflation wouldn't be that effective. So anyway, that's what they should have done. They didn't do that. Instead, they decided to have a gasoline crisis. Um, I threw in this thing about the Iran hostages. Now, the Iran hostages, that's a separate little issue, but it's kind of interesting how they, you know, put in Mossadegh in Iran and did some weird stuff over there, and then the hostages got taken. So at this point in time, what was happening was that middle class had it pretty good, right? They were getting some benefits from the economy, as in home ownership, good job, with pension, with insurance, with everything you would want, right? Also, I mean, they had a one income household too. So, in other words, you didn't have to have two people in the household working. Eventually, at some point along this in the same area, they did try to start having women also working. I mean, a full time job, not just part time or whatever, but two full time jobs. So that happens. I don't know exactly when that started or when that really kicked in, but it's along this time frame that they started doing that. But now, when Reagan became president, things started really getting devious. And what I'm saying is that the billionaires decided, okay, we're gonna do some funny business. This is the part you're not going to read in history books or whatever. People don't believe that billionaires conspire, or groups of people conspire to do things, but they absolutely do. They literally conspired to create the Federal Reserve, conspired to create the income tax, conspired to do all this stuff. So, but this is farther down. So we're in, let's say, around 1980 time frame. They had this fake gas crisis, which is really part of the inflation. Then Reagan comes along. Okay, Reagan's job, according to the billionaires, this is what they wanted. Now, you're not going to read this from anybody. Um, the history books or whatever, it's all fake. Everything you see in the history books has been made up. But what I'm going by here is just what I saw at the time and what has transpired instead of what you're going to read in a history book. So Reagan, he killed unions. So that was one of his jobs. He actually succeeded in that. So he started getting rid of all kinds of unions, whatever union you got. So first it was all the government unions, he got rid of them. Then he started focusing in on just private company unions. So that was a big thing. Also, Reagan was the guy who started to talk about welfare being a bad thing. So actually, that's the other thing. In the 60s, or up until the 60s, we had some good, solid um, stuff for, they call it a safety net. We had safety nets in place, okay? We had welfare, you know, and people, see, this is what Reagan started. He started this whole idea about all these people being welfare queens and all this other stuff. It was not even true. But I mean, any truth to it was created by the system. In other words, if you were on welfare, they created the system. They designed it specifically to keep checking up on you. And if you ever got a job or started to make money, you'd have to make a decision. Oh, I'm not making enough money, really. So I got to keep staying on welfare, but if I let them know I'm going to have a job and try to, so they made it to the system to where it forced people into welfare and forced them to stay into welfare. Otherwise, as soon as they get a job, if the job doesn't work out and they let them know about it, now what are they going to do now? And also, made it hard to kind of like, stop getting the welfare, but then get it again. So it was kind of a difficult thing. So anyway, he's the one that started really complaining about welfare. Also at this time, they decided, instead of just giving pensions, which was a company doing whatever financial stuff they needed to do to be able to create a certain amount of money for you when you left the company. So you went, you know, in the old days, you worked at a company 30, 40, 50 years, whatever it was. Then they paid you a certain percentage of your salary as you got older. I mean, if you live to be 100, they keep paying you every month or whatever. So it was a percentage, but sometimes it's 50%. Or I actually don't know the percentages because I never had a pension in my life. I never even had a company that I got a pension from. My parents were the last generation that got these things called pensions. But what we got was this 401k, which is a scam. Okay, the 401k whole system is a scam. So they decided to say, hey, instead of pensions, let's have the companies play around in the stock market and give their people some 401k. Now, some of the 401ks, you could have got away and made some money. You could have got put it in the stock market, or you could have just like took what your company was giving you and doubled it up. But it really was overall it was a scam because the whole, and I'll get to that later because the whole stock market of the they did a whole transfer of wealth to the rich with the whole stock market. But this was kind of the start of it, the 401k scam to get people's feet wet as far as getting involved with the stock market. Then also at this time, or even before that, we had the whole credit card thing. So they knew they were going to start ripping people off. So that all throughout this time, prosperity or the company's productivity was going up and up and up and up. But they didn't want to pay employees anything. All they wanted to do is they wanted to take all that extra money, right? So I don't have it here on the chart, but or as far as when Reagan was thing, but when Reagan was I did put the deregulation. So they did deregulation. Also, they changed all the tax laws, and the tax laws could have started been changing even a little bit earlier than Reagan. But by Reagan's time, the tax laws were so like. And here's the thing about the tax law: when they talk about a 90% taxation, it's complete and utter nonsense. For instance, if you made 200,000, or let's say you're a millionaire, you're making $1 million a year, okay? In the old days, what would happen was you're not paying 90% of your $1 million. You pay a certain percentage up to whatever, maybe 50,000. Maybe that's only 10% or whatever it was. Then you pay from 50,000 to 100,000. Maybe you pay a little bit more, and only when you get up to like 250, thousand, then you start paying the big, percentages, which is, it could be 90%. I mean, I guess in Eisenhower's time it was 90%. But here's the thing: they knew how to get around that because what they would never do is they would never have these CEOs, owners, and all these people really receiving tons of money, like millions of dollars a year. They would instead keep it in the stock market. They would put money back into the business. They would give money. They'd give all that extra money instead of just sucking it out and put it in their pockets. They would have to give it to somewhere, so they would build their business with it. So their businesses would get stronger. They'd be able to pay their employees more money and all this other stuff. So with Reagan coming along, they got rid of all these taxes on the high end, and these people just wanted all the money, and they got greedy, and they said, oh, well, now that we're getting all of our money, let's stop paying people. How about that? That's the next step. Now that we can extract all the money out of the company and put it in our personal pocket, let's minimize the pay that we're giving all these people. And that's what they did. So they deregulated, and they stopped paying people a lot. Then, as Reagan was going out of office, I remember distinctly. I was watching Larry King Live, and I see Ross Perot on there talking with They couldn't get Clinton, I guess, even though Clinton was the guy running for president against Perot. So, but Clinton had to, or Perot had to talk with that complete moron Al Gore. So Al Gore, I remember it distinctly. I mean, I can even picture these people in my head as they're talking. And Perot was 100% correct. He said NAFTA is a terrible, terrible deal. You guys are trying to take all of the industry and all of the factories and everything that we have in the United States, which makes the United States strong, and you're trying to send it overseas. And you're doing that just so billionaires can use cheap labor in other countries instead of paying our own people the right amount of money. So Ross Perot was 100% correct. And that was another part of this whole scam where billionaires and whatever, they wanted to rip everybody off. They wanted to destroy the middle class. They had no care for anybody. They sent every factory overseas and they made it and the government and Bill Clinton came along and he's 100% on board. Bill Clinton, all right, just so you know, Reagan, see, this is what they've done on a lot of stuff. A lot of things, they'll have a Republican president who tries to get things, sneak things through, right? Like welfare. So Reagan was just talking really bad about welfare the whole time he was president, but he could never get him to pass any laws to get rid of welfare. Well, then Clinton comes along, and guess what? Now he's a Democrat, and they think, oh, well, okay. But you know what he does? He guts welfare. Welfare is gone, basically. They first added, if I can remember correctly, I think they added work. So they had to say, okay, well, you got to prove you're a worker. And they added all these rules and things. And it gets back to what I said earlier, is that they have all these rules to where it makes welfare really bad. In other words, you can't, they try to say people are get on welfare and they stay on welfare because they're such lazy, low life losers, right? But it has nothing to do with the truth. The reason why people have to stay on welfare is because they've set the rules up so terribly that it forces people to stay on welfare, because if they ever go out and try to get a job, they're gonna fall into this trap of rules and regulations and have to deal with these people coming and checking in on them and all this other stuff. So it's just a total disaster. Anyway, it's done that way on purpose to try to get people off of welfare. So then they made it to where you get off of it, you can't get back on it, and then they just got rid of it. So now we don't have welfare at all. I mean, we got basically maybe food stamps. If you get injured or hurt or whatever, then you can get onto Social Security. But they really gutted our social safety nets pretty much from Clinton on. We got less and less. So then, as I said, Clinton, he expands NAFTA. We're talking about full globalism now. Okay, so we're going all over the world, and meanwhile, the United States started to go into a little bit of a slump, right? But here's the interesting piece. Oh, actually, there's other things. Let me just um, finish up with what I got here on my document. The other thing that Clinton did that Reagan couldn't do, again, is make some changes on the banking. So banking, he got rid of Glass-Steagall. Now, Glass-Steagall, if you don't know what that is, that's basically where, in the old days, a bank had to be a bank. And investment bank, they call it a bank. It's not really a bank. It's more of an investment house, had to be separated. So you couldn't have those two things in the same. So because they knew the stock market is like gambling. The stock market, I think the stock market is bullshit. I think it should be gone. I don't think we need a stock market. I really think it's just a way for rich people to